Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Stanley's Lucky Man, Season 2, Episode 6. So, going into this episode, it's kind of hard to follow all of it, but, I did enjoy, bits and pieces of this episode, mostly the story that is to play out with Isabella in this episode. Uh, really, other than that, there isn't much that really interested me in this episode. It's kind of like it's kind of like an art heist kind of chase kind of episode. um Also, I was just kind of going into this episode just kind of not exactly grasping every single thing that was to happen into it, but I did eventually get to enjoy bits and pieces of it. So here's what is to eventually go into this episode. So in this episode, we find Suri, who is to get into some legal action or whatever because of the punch that she gave to the canal killer from the last episode. We also have seemingly in this episode it's Isabel and Eve kind of going at it yet again, but also Eve is to now be after Harry because or Isabel is going after Harry because Isabel is to be tied to Harry's case because Harry is working on something that had been tied to Isabel's past. And so that leads us to, of course, get to a very interesting story where Isabel is kind of using her powers of her bracelet to try and get some information that she's to need or whichever. So, also, we do have both Isabella and Harry using their bracelets for two different kinds of things. And eventually, Harry is starting to realize that more and more that Harry is going to tell Isabella the truth and see what she says afterwards, which I think that's a very interesting thing, where eventually Harry is to confront Isabel about things that he had found and is trying to see where her head's at with things. So, but yeah, so going into this, I thought that this was just a good enough episode. So I think that's probably just good enough to probably go into spoilers about this episode, because let's tee it up. Let's do that. So what is to happen in this episode? So we are to have a guy who is to have a plane land and just go ahead and just go into it and just start shooting into people, killing them. So now we have Harry and his people needing to figure out why this guy went into this plane and killed people. It seems that there had been one person that this shooter had spent a lot of time killing and making sure that this guy was dead. And so, stuff had gone missing. Also, they had hoped that maybe there had been a phone there to eventually get a snapshot of this guy, but justifiably, it seemed that this killer wanted everyone to get rid of their phones because I guess he was really smart about this. But eventually, this leads to a guy, which leads into a couple of people that eventually leads to a bunch of people ending up dead. This movie becomes a painting heist deal, and so yeah, but eventually, it also ties into Isabella's backstory of her two dead kids. Sadly, no. I kind of yeah, she just has two dead kids. I didn't mean to not soften the blow of that, but it is yeah, that's basically how we approach this episode. So we're really to see both Harry and Isabella using either their bracelets for good or bracelets for evil. So let's get into this. Let's go out of our way to say that we went into spoilers about this because we saw this episode. So now it's time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this episode. So like I said, like I kind of when I did the teeing up motion, so there was this plane to land. There's a couple that is doing like some video, like mentioning, like, man, we just love this trip. I guess they're like vloggers or whichever. So, all of a sudden, a man is to, I guess, look like the grounds crew or something. He just pops into this plane. It starts popping off people, killing them, and then, of course, escapes, leaves, whichever. And so, uh, they're to find these people dead on this plane, and so we have Harry and Suri and everybody like going on to make their way into this plane. And so Suri is to mention to Harry that she might like get suspended for like her punching out the girl from the last episode, the killer from the last episode. And so what Suri's probably going to have to do is to go to like anger management or something like that, which I'm assuming that's probably a way to probably just like write her off the show, like that she's getting suspended is to write her off the show, because like obviously now I'm seeing Suri bizarrely with a bulletproof vest on and all kinds of things, and it's kind of getting fairly obvious why that Suri is to be written off this show. And like congratulations for her. But yeah, but like obviously like let's not bring it up, but there's a reason why Suri's getting suspended. But anyways, so uh, but I enjoy Suri, I really do. So, anyways, so they are to go onto the plane, and they are to, of course, like check a bunch of like things on this plane. Eventually, they are to realize that I guess there is a backpack that had gone missing, and they like the only real valuable thing that anyone was to have on this plane was there was one guy that was to have like 30,000 euros. And Harry's like, why would somebody purposely go onto this plane to steal 30,000 euros from somebody? Like, that doesn't seem like a reason to, like go after someone. Like that seems kind of flimsy to kill a bunch of people just for 30,000 euros. That doesn't seem like a huge, like, treasure trove of whatever. But, anyways, they eventually are to think like, well, hopefully we can desperately find like if somebody had a cell phone on this plane, so that way like we can get a picture of this guy. And coincidentally, there was one cell phone left on the plane, which was Elliot's, I'm assuming, because somebody dropped their phone. So Harry coincidentally is to find this phone with the picture of this guy, and so they find out it's a guy named Jurgen Block. Or Jurgen. I'm ill pronouncing that, but his name is Block, so we'll go with that for the rest of this episode. Uh, Coincidentally, Block is to actually have been tied to the murder of Isabel's kids. And Harry will eventually talk to Eve and ask her about that. And like Eve is to mention that Block had done car bombing to some big guy, I think Argentina or something. And coincidentally, Isabella's kids were like caught in that blast and were killed. And so Isabella, I guess, had went after Block and had like brutally like tortured and hurt Block, but not enough to be dead, not enough to die. And so that's why Block is back in town, not to go after Isabella. Like, he's just going after a people that was to, I guess, go and try to take like very high end uh, paintings that are inside backpacks or are inside certain luggages and whichever, which eventually Harry is to find while kind of sifting through the one of the backpacks of the recently deceased. So that leads to eventually now having Harry want to speak with a girl named Hannah to find out more information about Elliot. So Elliot is to mention that there were two friends of Elliot's that were to eventually want to like have him do a job, and of course these people were Andreas and Livia, and so Hannah's to mention that like maybe Hannah was assuming that this worked out so well for Elliot that like maybe he was banging both of them for like how like things were just going bizarrely well for these people. Anyways, so that leads to have Harry and his men just going like, okay, so we need to find uh, both like Warren and and Livia, or like the Livia Sorensen and yeah, so like it's basically the chase is on for like Warren and Olivia and so on and so forth. Anyway, so if anything, we have Harry who is to like flip a coin to have both Surrey and Orwell go off to one location uh, to meet with the other person that isn't Warren, because Harry is to go off and go to try to like see where Warren is. And so Harry is to go and of course see Warren, and it seems the spot where both Orwell and Surrey had went into evidently had been ransacked and is missing, I guess, a backpack. I guess there isn't any backpack that's there. So Harry is to go on to find Warren and kind of chase after him, but that is to also lead to Warren to get shot by Block, and of course, like taken any number of things from Warren to get the heck out of there. So, like, all this is to come down to a painting and so on and so forth, to the point of Harry going like, hey, I know a guy that knows a lot about paintings. So Harry goes to Rich and is to ask Rich about this painting and how like valuable that these things might be. And Rich is like, well, more than likely this could be like in the 20 like millions of price range, but like I think there was also like a set of these things, and hence why like maybe there's a group of people that all took these paintings and like and stole them and were trying to like hold them for eventually them to like sell on the black market somewhere. So that leads to Rich telling Harry that there is a guy who could actually sell these things uh, of these people, and so that is to lead to a place called the Stark House. So, so anyways, uh, we are to have Daisy, who is to show up at Harry and Rich's place, and so Harry is to leave to go off to, of course, like he had figured out something of his case, and so now Rich and Daisy are like watching a John Wick film because Rich just wanted to see a movie, and he asked Harry like, "Hey, do you want to watch a film with me?" And Harry's like, ah, I guess, but eventually he ended up realizing that like he needs to go into work. So Rich and Daisy are like talking to one another, and like Daisy is thinking that maybe both Rich and Daisy could be like a Robin to Harry's Batman, that eventually they can like assist him in some kind of way. And Rich is like, yeah, like I'm sure we're just gonna easily be able to like just help Harry with all of this. And Daisy's like, come on, like maybe we can help him somehow. But like Rich is like, sure, okay, uh-huh, right. Um but Daisy is to just kind of talk about like Harry's superpowers to either like Harry or Rich, and that is to just lead to them. I guess Daisy desperately wanting to like be Harry's sidekick, bizarrely, because that just makes a whole lot of sense. What is Daisy gonna bring to the table? Because it's not like she's like solving any of these crimes. So transitioning, so Harry was to ask Eve about how Block was tied with these murders, and so eventually Isabella is to make her way to Eve, and they're Eve is to eventually just start fighting Eve, or Isabella's fighting Eve, and so Eve is punching Isabella, and so Isabella is just like, dude, you realize that I have a decent 50% chance that I can dodge your punches every time you are to swing at me, and every time I'm going to win. And so this just leads uh to eventually Isabel getting what she needs from Eve, and basically just kind of talking about Rue, who had been uh, tortured by Eve, and so on and so forth. Harry eventually is to also go and talk to uh, Isabella about the video that Eve had given to him, and is asking her, it's well, is any of this true? Are you gonna come clean right now? And Isabella's like, I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what Rue is talking about. And all of a sudden we have Isabella that's starting to distance herself away from Harry. And she's like, you know what, I think maybe you and I need to start like giving ourselves some air, kind of just go our own ways, and so on and so forth. But eventually Isabel is to kind of want to squeeze information out of Eve, about what Harry was to come to her with. So uh pushing on. So we're at the Stark house, and so Harry is to eventually talk to Andreas Stark. They are to find Andreas shot, and I think Andreas wasn't the right name. I think Warren was the right name, for me to talk about Warren and Olivia, because I think Andre was just some guy that was to be said later. So Andreas was shot, and so Livia had been taken by Block as a hostage, and of course backpack yet again. So what ends up happening is that Surrey is to hold a gun onto Block, shoot him, and eventually Block is now running away, because of course Surrey is to have this gun, is and so on and so forth. So Block is to run off, to eventually run right into Isabella. And so Block is to mention how he's horrifically tortured by Isabella, and so eventually that is to lead to eventually Block being able to escape from this, and because Harry is to also get in the way of both Block and Isabella. So Harry is now needing to figure out where quite possibly Block's next move is. They end up finding out that Block is to have a plane, and is to be at this Ripley airfield. And so what ends up happening is that Harry is to be calling Isabel, and like they're talking about things, and Isabel is wanting to know the information where Block is, and Harry's not going to give that to Isabella. And Isabella is just like, well, like I can use this bracelet to get that information. And it eventually leads, while on the walkie, like they had said exactly where Block is, and so that's all Isabella needed to go to the Ripley airfield. So, uh, so now Harry is at the airfield, and he is to eventually, of course, uh, bump into Block, but also so does Isabel, and it gets to this whole like thing of like this jostling around of these guns and so on and so forth. Eventually, Harry is to like have a tussle with Block, eventually like pouring gasoline all over Block, and just to like try to like get this gun out of this guy's hands. Plus, also like it's basically a hindrance for this guy to fire this gun, because like if this guy is to fire this gun right next to this like tanker or whichever, maybe this whole thing would light them up and kill them off. Let me pause here to get a reset here. All right. So we are at this Ripley airfield, and so Isabella is to show up late, and so reasonably Isabella's play is the fact that she can use her bracelet to kill uh, to easily kill Blotch, because or Block. We have at a point where Block is to eventually just have his gun onto Isabella, and what ends up happening, because like Isabella is to put the gun down, and Block is to pick it up, trying to shoot at Isabella, and of course, bizarrely, this shot is to miss, like it's to almost like graze Isabella's ear, and it ends up hitting this gas tanker instead, and it all of a sudden just starts lighting the fuse of this guy's like gasoline leak, and just starts lighting this guy on fire, dropping him to the ground and killing him off. So, uh, eventually, Isabel is to eventually get what she wants, because she was to use the bracelet to kill this guy. And so I think this is really where like Harry is starting to just be like, okay, like you could have put this guy to justice, but instead it just feels like you're wanting to just kill everybody off, and you're using the power of the bracelet to be able to do that, like Rue had said and people before have said. And so like basically anyone who is to say that you aren't using this bracelet to kill people, like, has proven that now by having Isabel, like with Harry's very eyes, seeing her kill somebody with this bracelet. So uh so that is to eventually push on. And also while in the spot where Surrey was to have like a gun on Block, Orwell was to also get shot. And so while both Surrey and Harry and Winter were all together, uh Winter was to tell Orwell like, hey, like don't get shot again. And like also like Winter was telling both of them to just kind of like follow some leads and so on and so forth. But anyways, like yeah, I think I covered a bulk of what was to happen in this episode. Like I think towards like the very like end of this episode, there's like a conversation that is to be had between like Harry and Eve. But yeah, so other than that, I think I covered a bulk of this episode. But uh, like to have like really just Harry just kind of really just kind of terrified of what Isabella is going to do in the future. Like, because basically Isabella is just going to get whatever she wants. Like, she's going to be able to use the bracelet to kill people, and there's nothing that Harry can do. Because Harry is to basically want to arrest Isabella for all of these murders, but there's no real hard evidence to connect Isabella to any of these murders because it's supposedly her power, the bracelet, that is to uh, start killing people. And so Isabella is just like, well, like, go and try to, like, turn me in for any of these murders. You won't be able to get anything on me, and it'll just be a waste of time. And because Harry is to either go after, like, Block or to go after Isabella at this point. And so Harry decides to go after Block because Isabella is just like, there's nothing he can do, like, evidence wise, to pin any of these murders of past episodes on Isabella. But Harry is to eventually talk with Winter, and so Winter is to tell Harry, it's like, it seems like you've been having quite a lot of accidents lately. Like, is there something that you need to tell me, Harry? And Harry's like, no, there's nothing I can tell you. And so Winter's just like, well, okay. Like, bizarrely, every single one of these cases, all of a sudden are to come up that Harry's people that he is to think, like, is the murderer or whichever, are just bizarrely ending up dead. And like, Winter is to just be like, hey, like, if there's something you need to tell me, like, tell me now. And Harry's like, I got nothing. So which Winter is probably seeing that as a lie from Harry, and so maybe he's gonna, like, go back to, like, distrusting Harry and just like, I want him out of the Force. Like, I want him out of here. Like, Orwell, you stay here somehow or another. Because Harry, at the very tail end of this episode, is to give, like, Surrey some kind of plaque, and also to give Orwell some, like, jelly beans or whatever, like, his favorite jelly beans. And, like, Orwell's like, I'm not transferring because you're going to give me jelly beans. And Harry's like, I don't care. Because if anything, like, Harry did a good thing, or Harry saw Orwell did a good thing with Surrey, and so, like, here's some jelly beans. Like, so, like, with that said, yeah, like, that is, for me, like, a bulk of what is just going on with this episode. And so, yeah, if anything, yeah, like, I'm gonna get out of here. I think I covered a bulk of this, but if there's anything that I, like, didn't remember, or there's a lot of stuff to have unpacked from this episode, great. People can go ahead and watch this and just say, oh yeah, like, he did not say this, or he did not whatever, and that's perfectly fine. Leave it down in the comments below to let me know something that I forgot about. But without a doubt, more than likely, I might have to rebuttal or something in the very next episode review. But with that, I'm going to call this episode a do. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.